This is your last chance. After this...
Or should we not follow the advice of the galactically stupid?
That is a nice boulder.
Loaded for speed! Go!
Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you pre-recorded from two undersized apartments in New York City, it's Revenge of the Film Nerds.
There, we're in a tight spot.
I hate when people talk during the movie.
With your hosts, Black Crystal.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
And Jack Manley.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
A podcast for nerds by nerds.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
Failure is not an option.
And now, here are your hosts, Black Crystal and Jack Manley.
Hello, everybody, and what is up? Welcome to another episode of Revenge of the Film Nerds. Yes, it's your girl, BK, Black Crystal, and we are holding it down with my amazing co-host, the extraordinary, the lovely, manly Jack Manley.
Ooh, back at it and feeling good. This is, it's been an unbearably hot summer. I think we all know that, but having this to just hang around, focus on, sit around the house, avoid the heat, watching good movies. It's actually turning out to be a pretty nice end to the summer, BK.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, nothing screams summer to me than movies, summer blockbuster, hanging out with your friends, your family, and just watching it, all the things. So I've been so excited to watch movies with you. I know I was just hanging out with my family and we were giving the little ones a look into Alien, bringing them into the Predator world. I watched Terminator, the first one, for the first time. Jack, ugh.
Now, okay. I didn't realize you hadn't seen the Terminator. That's a whole other discussion.
I saw Terminator 2. Okay, I'm right. I'm a 90s baby, so I missed the first one.
Are we gonna we're supposed to be talking about The Princess Bride today, but am I gonna have to derail this whole podcast just so we can talk about the Terminator?
I'm thinking maybe an extended special video, something, a stream involving a Terminator discourse or a watch party even, because I have bars to say and share now, especially with our boy Arnold. I am and I know we're going to get to see a little bit of Arnold later in this season of Revenge of the Film Nerds, but today we are talking about a film I have never seen, but apparently is a staple among many of friends and family, which is that of The Princess Bride.
Yes, indeed. 1987, directed by Rob Reiner and written by William Goldman. And I will say this, BK, I've been giving you some grief about the fact that you haven't seen this film, but at the end of the day, it was a film that was under the radar when it came out, and it was a film that really built its reputation through home video releases. For instance, I benefited as a kid from having the 1994 video release. That's the one that I owned, and that's how I gained the abiding affection that I have for this film. And a lot of people have that experience with it. And in a way, it's become a modern cult classic.
Cult classic is definitely the word, because when you watch this film, if you haven't already, well, you better buckle up, because we're about to get into this story, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to want to watch it by the end of it, because you really do need to see and experience this film, because the moment you set foot into it, it subverts all expectations and then provides more. And this is a film that came out in the 80s. So when I tell you I had such a great time, Jack, I am so happy you suggested this movie. Like literally, I can't believe I missed this.
I'm happy to hear that. So, just upon first impressions, what was it that struck you about this upon seeing it the first time? I'm very curious.
Okay, so check it, Jack. I was getting into the movie, you see the cover, the name, the title, The Princess Bride. You're like, okay, cool. This is going to be like a period piece. And the moment you start the film, it's in modern day, which was the 80s, I guess, and put you in the scene of a kid. And that right away made me more like palatable to the story that I was about to get into. Like it literally smashed anything I had going into this and was like, here we go, we're gonna set you down and we're gonna give you this entry point that isn't really common in a lot of stuff, but is common in films of the time. Like I immediately got Labyrinth vibes for some reason with that type of start. I don't know if that makes sense, Jack, but like, you know what I mean? Like, let me bring you in, let me tell you this story, this storybook story, and watch it come to life. I think that is what got me actually interested into it, let alone the amazing characters. Oh my God, there's so many awesome characters.
I love that you pick up on the framing device, because that's something that's been with The Princess Bride since it came to being.
Really?
It was originally a novel written in 1973 by William Goldman, and the way that the novel is actually structured is he presents it in his book as being a story that is abridged and being read. The story is by a fictional author named S. Morgenstern, and the actual telling of the tale is interspersed with Goldman's little commentaries on the story. It's kind of like, I don't know if anyone else has seen this go around Twitter, but that concept that's gone around for the Lando Calrissian show, where it's just Lando talking in a bar about things he's done and has little interruptions with, wait a minute, that's not how it happened.
Yeah.
It's that exact idea put into the framing of a fantasy story, of I don't know if I'd even call it a period piece.
It isn't. You're totally right, Jack. It isn't. I think I'm jumping the gun on what you're about to say, but it's definitely a fantasy story. I was totally wrong with my initial impressions at like the cover art and some screen grabs.
Not only that, but dare I say it, I feel like The Princess Bride is our first foray as a podcast into the world of romantic comedy.
Oh my God. Ew. Jack, I don't do romantic comedy. How dare you find the one rom-com that I like? I'm so angry. But you're right. You're totally right. That is definitely, that is the theme. That is the premise. I mean, off top, it starts about talking about love.
Yeah, it shares the one thing that all Hollywood romantic comedies have, regardless of their setting, is that there is an overriding belief within the world of the power and the justness of the true love of the characters. The universe is arcing towards the true love of the man, and usually man and woman, especially in the 80s at this time, you didn't usually get transgressive or gay relationships put onto the screen. So it was all at this time about the moral justice of the love, and that is the framing device in romantic comedy 100%, whether it be The Princess Bride or Made in Manhattan.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and I think that's probably why, as someone who, like, I grew up, I'm femme presenting for sure, but I hate stereotypical like feminine things, and I feel like I associated that with like rom-coms and with the lens and the very heteronormative ideas that were always present in this. But even though the main couple is a straight couple, the characters themselves are so strong, and the idea of love, I feel like, is so detached from what you normally kind of get into with the traditional rom-coms that I feel like everybody kind of knows. This movie really did something quite special that I feel like I've only seen in certain like animated features.
You know what I think part of it is, at least from my perspective, I think the fact that it's a fantasy story takes the edge off of the, kitsch and cliche that you get with a lot of romantic comedy. You can believe in the justness of the love because you're in a fantasy realm. I mean, if you're going to have a fire swamp where you have random fire explosions, the world's quick as quicksand, and of course, the rodents of an unusual size, if that kind of stuff can exist, then surely the power of love can actually conquer all.
I like that you said it that way, though. Like the power of love. Like it is that. And you're totally right. Like as you were saying it, I'm sitting there and I'm like 100%. I mean, like the fantasy realm a lot of the time, and we see this in tons of other films, in more contemporary pieces as well, how love is a protective spell and magic. Love conquers all. I mean, I was trying to hint to something there because, we don't like to support certain creators that say crazy things. But very much love as a source of magic or a power in a fantasy world is the ultimate form of magic. And this film kind of does it in a subtle way, but leans into typical fantasy cliche to kind of add that comedy that you were talking about, that rom-com feel where those cliches are more in fantasy tropes or adventure type tropes and less about the love they had. I mean, I still have qualms with homegirl not recognizing that was her true love. That's your true love? You can't tell your true love with a mask on? Like, come on now, Jack. Like, really?
Well, of course not. I mean, listen, and let's just get into Carrie Elwes's garb as Wesley for a second there, because honestly, that literal costume, that design, that relates all the way back to when Douglas Fairbanks played Zorro once upon a time. The studio made the conscious decision that he would only have the top of his face covered, because if you could see the eyes, the nose, and the mouth and jaw, you would know it was the beautiful Douglas Fairbanks underneath that mask. So, of course, when you're casting a guy like Carrie, who he really, again, we're talking about another guy 2 weeks in a row who just has that classic Hollywood look about him. Like, Carrie Elwes in this film looks like you picked him up out of the 1930s and placed him in the 1980s.
You literally said that, and I was like, okay, I also need to know where I know this man from, sidebar, because I was gonna lose it. And I'm like, oh my God. I pull it up. I'm like, first of all, Saw. Yes, I know you mentioned that. And I was like, big Saw fan. So like, now I need to go binge this. But I know him. My earliest memory of him is from Twister.
That's
100%.
I remember. We've spoken a little bit about how resonant that movie was for you as a kid, so it's kind of cool.
It was so kind of cool to see that reference. I went, holy cow. All right. Well, we're making a lot of full circles here in BK's world. So had to let y'all know on that one. And if you know this actor from anything else, please let us know what you know him from. Because, man, I didn't know I was in a white man, but I guess I am after that. Because this whole movie, I'm sweating. So I'm trying to figure out how such an amazing, fantastical, because that's really what it is. It's very fantastical story gets created like this. I mean, sure, storybook-esque, let's have a narration, but a translation so good in 87? Like, bro, this is like top tier adaptation if you're telling me that the source material of this is a novel, Jack.
Well, it comes from the fact that there was a lot of collaboration between a lot of really extraordinarily talented creatives and writers to make the film actually happen. So, I mentioned the name William Goldman, the novelist who wrote this film. To those of you who are uninitiated, because, granted, Goldman has not, because he passed, made a film in a long, long time, but just a brief rundown of some of his writing credits from just his screenplays, not his novels, not just his screenplays. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He wrote the original Stepford Wives. He wrote All the President's Men. He wrote Marathon Man. He wrote A Bridge Too Far, which after Apocalypse Now is probably my favorite war film. Princess Bride, obviously. He wrote, and now we're getting to our films that be contemporary to us. He did Misery. He did Chaplin. He did Maverick.
Okay.
He did The Ghost in the Darkness, and he did Dreamcatcher.
Wait, Dreamcatcher?
Yep.
All right, hold on. Okay.
This is a man, like, if you have 2 of those credits on your resume as a writer, you're in good shape. Goldman is just... It's not a stretch to say he was probably the most important screenwriter of the second half of the 20th century.
Wow.
Unfortunately, he had a little trouble getting this off the ground from its novelization. There was a very brief and very lost project in 1973 that almost got made with Richard Lester, the director of the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night and Help. He was attached to do with the film in 73, and I believe that might have been the film where Christopher Reeve was cast as Wesley. That might have been a later version, but in any case, it almost got off the ground, and then it fell into, as so often is the case, production hell and cost problems. So it was something that Originally, Goldman was frustrated by the system, but he believed in it so much, BK, that after that adaptation failed, he paid $500,000 of his own money to buy his rights back from the studio. He cared about it that much.
Wait, what? Okay, I applaud you, bro. Like, let me just take a moment, because we are in a world in 2022 where studios and creators and IP rights, it's a little wild west out here. So I have to give credit where credit's due, where you felt so passionate about this project. You were like, listen, I'm gonna do what it takes. Let me get those back right quick.
So that's one piece of this. That's one piece of this is Goldman's determination. But really, the second half of this story, as far as the film getting made, starts on the set of maybe the most important sitcom in American history. I'm talking about Norman Lear's All in the Family. Now, this was the seminal show of its time. It was in the late 70s and early 80s, really the show, actually throughout the 70s, I'm speaking, out of turn there, throughout the full 70s, it kind of defined what the American middle class watched and how it saw itself represented on television. And it was through this lens that Rob Reiner, playing the son-in-law, the liberal son-in-law in this household of Michael Stivich, came to practically world renown. But Norman Lear was a guy who believed in backing young artists and backing their ambitions. And so in 1984, when Rob Reiner wanted to do This Is Spinal Tap, Norman Lear was the guy that backed him. So Rob Reiner is starting to get his start right around the time that Goldman is sort of on. He took about a 10-year hiatus in the business. Around this time, Rob Reiner started coming to prominence, and he wanted to do The Princess Bride after Spinal Tap and after his film Stand By Me. And what the studio told him is that he could do any film he wanted to do except for Princess Bride.
What? I'm so pissed. Well, okay, I didn't know. So when it's Jack's story time about the pre-production, because it's actually my favorite part of the podcast. I don't know if it's the listener's favorite part, but it's mine. And I didn't know I was going to get into this type of a story. I'm heated, bro. Are you serious?
Yeah, the situation was in Hollywood. Reiner found out after being rejected on his pitch that this was a film that Hollywood had tried to do a number of times and had tried to attach a number of people to, and it ultimately had just failed to come about in a satisfactory way. And we're talking about some heavy hitters too. I mean, BK, would you believe that the French New Wave auteur Francois Truffaut was at one point on this film?
No way.
The guy who did 400 Blows nearly did The Princess Bride. This nearly, at one point in time, this was nearly Robert Redford's directorial debut.
I can't.
And also, at one point in time, it nearly became another film for director Norman Jewison, who did In the Heat of the Night and the most famous adaptation of Fiddler on the Roof. So there were powerhouses attached to this film.
Wow.
And it just couldn't get over the finish line for whatever reason. But this is where Lear comes in. Now, again, I gave you the context about William Goldman, who is probably the most important screenwriter in the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. Norman Lear is probably the most important writer, period, regardless of medium, in the last 50 years. Listen to, just give you an idea of the sitcoms he was responsible for between 1970 and 1985. All in the Family, which I've already mentioned.
Yep.
But also Sanford and Son, mm-hmm. Maude, Good Times, The Jeffersons, and One Day at a Time.
Oof.
I mean, honestly, but the portfolio of work that Lear was responsible for, Goldman, really their only comparison I can think of in contemporary American writing in terms of impact is Stephen King at this time. It would be those three in my head as the most influential writers of that period. But Lear, because he had had all of this success and because he had this faith in young artists, he again stepped in. And the reason that Reiner was able to make this film is because Norman Lear stepped in and he gave him financial backing and the financial faith to be able to actually go to a studio with the additional funds needed to start this film.
That's crazy. I did not know that this film had this much of a backstory, I guess, right? Like, not to say, every film is just easily made, hand wave, boom, like, or every film has something crazy about it. Because we've had some stories where it's pretty straightforward. Guy has an idea, it's a movie, studio wants it, boom, it happens. This is like an uphill battle. This is literally an epic story just to create the story. And for something so, I was gonna say a terrible word, but let me articulate myself here. For a story that is so lighthearted and whimsical, you would not think this much kind of went into it. You know what I mean? I guess that's what's shocking to me. Like, really, out of all the films, like, I would have thought Dreamcatcher had more of a backstory than The Princess Bride. Like, what?
Well, really, I mean, it's kind of cool because it is a film about love, and it's kind of the love and compassion that these creatives shared that kind of brought it together. Like I mentioned, William Goldman was involved in this film, and this was the one that got over here. I glossed over his kind of part in this a little bit, but really, it starts, or at least his kind of influence on Reiner starts from in 1973 when the book came out. Rob Reiner's father, Carl Reiner, the famous comedian, gave him a copy of the book, and so Reiner had always loved the project from the word go, and Goldman was among his favorite writers. So when he started doing it, at this period of time, you understand, Goldman had gone on a roughly 10-year hiatus from Hollywood, mostly due to the fact that he had a really kind of miserable time writing All the President's Men and did not have a good production there. He had a better time with A Bridge Too Far, which was his last film for a while, but a lot of his scripts just weren't getting bought and he wasn't in demand. So he was kind of out of Hollywood at this point and just focusing on his novels. The only screenplay he had put out of late was 1986's Heat, not to be confused with the Pacino De Niro one in 95. And really, it was because Rob Reiner went to him and worked with him in sessions, talking to him earnestly about what he loved for the novel and how he wanted to work it and how he wanted to set things up. And it was that Goldman, in those sessions, responded to Reiner and had real faith in him and told him, like, this is like the best process I've ever had. That was what gave Reiner the confidence to keep pushing forward and to keep getting this made, even in the face of the financial specter that he had in front of him. But having the bond with Goldman, having the connection with Lear, who believed in him, that was what really made the difference here.
Wow, that's wild. So how does this love child end up taking the first step into production? Like, we have the story, we've had the back and forth. What was the pivotal moment that was like, all right, this is it, we've got the people, let's do it, let's do the thing?
I mean, really, once Lear was on board, it was sort of full speed ahead, but they did have a couple of hurdles with casting because they had a lot of options they wanted to go with. But the one place they didn't have a hurdle was with Wesley. They knew they wanted Cary Elwes. They had seen him in Lady Jane, and they thought that he was just absolutely perfect for it and the appropriate guy. And what's more is, in another little bit of serendipity, BK, Cary Elwes had read The Princess Bride in his childhood, and the character that he identified with most was Wesley.
Oh, no. That's so funny. That's like having your favorite piece of work and like shipping yourself as a main character. You're like, okay, now I need to cast someone that isn't myself. Like, let me figure this one out.
Yeah, no, he never believed he would have the opportunity to play the role of Wesley on the screen. That wasn't something that entered his mind, but he actually had the connection with his book.
Oh, that's so cool.
The one real hurdle, I think, with casting, there were two big ones. One, literally big, because Fezzik proved to be a genuinely difficult casting. Now, let's not get it twisted. There was only one person to play this role, and that was Andre the Giant. But at the time, because he was still very hot in the pro wrestling scene, he had a match booked for Tokyo and the Tokyo Dome that was going to interfere with production. So it was only after his match was canceled that he ended up actually being able to do the set, and WWF at the time gave him the clearance to do so. But had he had that match in Tokyo, BK, we could have ended up with either Lou Ferrigno or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as Fezzik.
Oh my God. No way. I'm also reading here like some of the other potential castings for other characters. They went through a lot, bro. Like a lot. I mean, I can't imagine anyone else but who I saw on the screen. Like, there's a lot of talk about this film being, a quote unquote perfect film, and I'm kind of leaning towards not disagreeing. But I quite frankly can't imagine anyone else being any of these characters. It's astounding. I mean, Jack, do you even know who they were looking for to play Buttercup, or who auditioned for Buttercup?
Absolutely. I'll let you run it down, BK, but let's just say, to preface, it is a quite literal murderer's row of a who's who in the late 80s of, like, hot name actresses. Like, listen to this.
It's so bad. It's so bad. So you got Uma Thurman, Meg Ryan, Sean Young, Susie Ames, Courtney Cox, Alexandra Paul, and even Whoopi Goldberg. Like, what? What?
Whoopi was throwing down in the late 80s.
I'm just saying. Look. Can we get Whoopi as Buttercup? I mean, that'd be a different movie.
Let's not get it twisted. We were only 3 years away from Ghost now, so she had the chops at the time.
True. But that lineup, that's crazy. It's one of those things when you see so many people potentially picked for a role. I mean, we had this in The Mummy as well, where you are looking for that character. You are looking for a specific thing. I don't know if there's a word for it. I think maybe other languages could better articulate the thing I'm looking for.
If I can suggest something, because it happened again with the casting of Buttercup, I think the word for this movie really is serendipity. Robin Wright was not, at the time, she wasn't married to Sean Penn yet, but at the time she was just in a kind of a career rut, just sort of doing a recurring role on a soap called Santa Barbara at the time. And she just, wasn't really confident about, going for movie roles. But her agent decided, he heard about the casting call, and he heard that they were having trouble finding the right actor for it, and said, hey, Robin, you should go do this. And the thing is that after impressing Rob Reiner, she was invited over to meet William Goldman, the writer, who was ultimately going to be the arbiter of, what he envisioned in his head as Buttercup was going to be the best guy they had. Mm-hmm. And what happened is that she went to the door, and as Rob Reiner opened the door for her, she was literally in a white summer dress, backed by a halo from the sun. And William Goldman literally walks across the room and just goes, well, that's what I wrote.
This is it.
And by the way, BK, that casting, that moment with William Goldman, that was about a week before they started filming.
No. Oh my God. That, again, the stars aligned.
But that second hurdle I told you about, that was the one. And it was a big one until serendipity. Robin Wright has the guts to go for that role, and it turns out it is the perfect role for her.
Wow. That's amazing. I love casting stories like that, as me who one day aspires to maybe be on one of the many screens. I just want one of those moments to happen to me. You show up and they go, I need you.
I will say, though, some of these fantasy castings are a little out there. Only one I could see or have an interest in, all respect to Wallace Shawn, who is amazing in this as Vicini, that role almost went to Danny DeVito, and that makes me a little curious.
That's not a bad choice. I'm not even complaining at that pick. If anybody else, yes, that makes sense.
The role was specifically written, and the casting was specifically looking for someone who had a little bit more diminutive stature. And so Wallace Shawn and Danny DeVito were really considered for that.
Wow. Okay.
Which is, I think, is a cool little touch to the character of Vicini, especially when you see in the early shots in the film him bullying Andre the Giant and him bullying Mandy Patinkin as Inigo Montoya. Is just he is this really tiny guy who has this overinflated ego and overinflated confidence to where he will get right up in the face of quite literally the largest person on earth at the time and just absolutely order them around like he's the boss. with respect to Danny DeVito, Wallace Shawn was the right choice here, I think, at the end of the day.
Oh, 100%. I agree with you. And also a little tidbit that I liked to draw attention to about Andre. I know we've talked about him earlier and his role, but apparently this is probably one of his like amazing experiences that he's had on set. Like everyone like just treated him so kindly and was just a fellow member of the cast. And I feel like that just is a testament to the passion project that this is. It brought so many good people together to create something really, really special. So I love that.
To be honest, I'd love to put that in context for a second. You know that I've been greatly influenced by and enriched by being in the pro wrestling world for a period of time.
Yes, please.
Andre is a wonderful figure within the world of wrestling, but in a lot of ways, he's also a really tragic figure because he, as a wrestler and as a spectacle, it made it very hard for him to be himself. He was either, feared by people or he was gawked at. But everywhere he went, there was always that kind of, we would see it today with a guy like LeBron James, but like that level of attention was on him all the time. And he was a gentle, soft-spoken man deep down at heart. He wasn't, he had to be this fearsome giant to be this, draw within the wrestling business, but he was a sweet guy who put himself through a lot. He drank a lot because he had a disease called acromegaly, which thank goodness we have more advanced treatments for today. But he was constantly growing and becoming larger because he had this condition. It was slowly killing him. And, if you think about the strain of a guy in the 1970s and 80s of his size having to fly all over the world to be a spectacle in Japan, to be a spectacle in Mexico, to be a spectacle in the UK. He led a very, very hard life where he never really got to be a person. And because Rob Reiner has said, and he's proven it with his productions, that he takes a great pride in making a set a wonderful place to be in a family setting. And Andre getting to take advantage of that, I think, particularly his relationship with Robin Wright, they were thick as thieves, and he always describes her relationship with Andre extremely fondly on that film. To have him have that freedom to just be treated as a person and not to be Andre the Giant for a few weeks had to be a truly special experience for a guy that had a very difficult time. So just to put it in context of what his life was like, the fact that this was a special production for him is a very big deal in my opinion.
100%. And I know I love you take the time to really like break that down for people who aren't in the wrestling world. I know I'm not, but I was aware of who Andre the Giant was. Shout outs to my mom for always keeping me in the know with things. But to give it in layman's term and a little BK sauce, you talked about Andre flying around to be a spectacle in the 80s. Planes ain't got no leg room for normal people in 2022. I just want you to sit there and think about what that might be like to have his condition to be in a plane in the 80s, bro. This is probably the most uncomfortable situation of your life, let alone walking through an airport, going to a store, trying to just live your daily life. It's got to be so frustrating. So to be taken seriously and to be treated just as anybody else is such a simple request on set. I am so happy to hear that something like that happened and that this film, The Princess Bride, was the one. And honestly, I could not imagine anyone else playing the character. And I say it because there are just so many characters in this film that are phenomenal, Jack. Like, I've got to ask, who is your favorite character in this film? Like, who did you resonate with so quickly? Because I know who mine was. We might have the same one.
We might, but the character that always, even as a kid, was really resonant with me was Inigo Montoya, Mandy Patinkin's character.
Yes! Me too! Oh my God, yes!
I think what's so interesting about that role, and Patinkin was a guy who his experience and his acumen was all built up on Broadway, as he was highly regarded in those circles, much more than film at the time. And this was really kind of a breakout role for him on screen. But what's special about the way he plays that role in this film to me is that he really allows himself to be unguarded with his emotions, despite being a very active and very action-based character. he is a sword fighter. He is a skilled tradesman, and he gives you a lot of the best action in the film as a result. But at the same time, he does so much with quiet moments and with you can feel the emotion coming off of him every time you see him on the screen. And it just makes his desire for revenge and his desire to avenge his father something that you really feel. And I think, despite the fact that it's an incredible quote, I think that's why we all run around these days saying, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare
to die." Oh my God.
Stop saying that.
Stop saying that. It was so good. And to that point, the characterization of the characters in here are so awesome in ways where, a lot of fantasy stories have tropes, but the tropes are done so well and add for a bit of depth. And I think that's what makes the characters so awesome. You get those typical class types, very Dungeons and Dragons-y. I caught myself a lot of the time talking about the main character being like, man, I wish I had this swashbuckler's charisma, because I want to be a character that pulls up and goes, let's have a battle of wits. I put poison in one of these cups, and have the other person actually drink it and agree to it. Insane to me. Absolutely insane. Which, by the way, I totally guessed that the poison was in both cups. Shout outs to me. Come on, I'm a smarter person.
You did, in fact, nail that one off top. But I will say, just talking about the framing of the film for a second, I think one of the reasons why it excels and why those subversions are so effective is that it is built and structured very Hollywood. You do, in the story, move from set piece to set piece to set piece, and you do so very briskly. But the set pieces themselves are so good and in their own self-contained way that every scene becomes memorable. Like, one that I think about often just is it's a funny one-off moment when they're at the gate, Fezzik, rip his arms off. Oh, you mean this key. But it's just having these little witticisms put into these self-contained structures and into these situational, very Hollywood-style framings is extremely effective here. I mean, can we talk about the fact that the greatest sword fight in film history, as far as I am concerned, was filmed not the way that we're used to seeing action sequences with cut after cut after cut. It was filmed like a 1950s style sword fight.
Oh, 100%. I'm so glad you brought us here because, bro, if you were on the fence about watching this film or revisiting this film until right now, let me tell you, the choreography in this sword fight, multiple sword fights. I think there's 3 that are really good, but one that is the best. That initial fight with Wesley and Indigo there, when he's chasing upon our group, our band of thieves, is by far the moment that locked me. And I was the little kid listening to the story when that fight started, Jack. Excellent. And it totally alluded to traditional films. I know you said a time period. I'm not good with time periods, but I've seen at the beginning of a lot of viewings at the Alamo, they like to play a lot of older films in theme with the main movie you're going to watch. The Alamo is a movie theater. If you don't have that in your area, I'm sorry, you're missing out. Go check it out. # not sponsored. Sorry.
That's her residual check going to her phone.
That's my check going. No. But for real, if you go to the Alamo and you do get to see those movies at the beginning, they've shown a lot. And I saw some of these old movies and clips of the style, and they don't have a lot of cuts. It is just a single shot in a great wide shot, and the choreography kind of takes place throughout the scene and takes a lot of use of the environment that it's around. And I think that is what's so awesome, along with the stunts. Jack, you've got to bust down where this kind of style of fighting even comes from, because I am a baby to old films.
Well, I will say this is, for one thing, this production benefited from the fact that Mandy Patinkin and Carrie Elwes worked with 2 sword masters named Peter Diamond and Bob Anderson, and super nerds of Star Wars will know those names because those were the guys that did the choreography in the first 3 Star Wars films.
Yeah.
So they had a great repository to go from. I mean, these are guys that understand, like, if you've seen the original Star Wars A New Hope, which most of us have at this point, these are guys that understood how to do sword fights the way masters like Akira Kurosawa would stage their sword fights, to do them for maximum dramatic effect rather than just simply making them about the sword fight itself. So that was one influence, but the other was that Patinkin and Elwes also took upon themselves to try and get their hands on and watch every single sword fight they could find from every single film they could get their hands on. One, in fact, that they reference as a big influence that I made a point of watching today, and it's a good fight, is the sword fight in the film Scaramouche from 1952. It's a costume drama. There's a sword fight in there between Stuart Granger and Mel Ferrer that is very similar to this. You've got a lot of jumping up and down on set pieces, a lot of messing with levels, and a lot of repartee, a lot of dialogue between the two sword fighters as it's going on. A lot of teasing, a lot of talking about sword styles. So they really went to a classic era of costume drama and of sort of big melodrama within Hollywood. But even deeper than that, it gets to the kind of sword fighting that you would see, and I get to reference him again 2 weeks in a row. You would have seen the kind of sword fighting you see in Princess Bride in Errol Flynn's Robin Hood films once upon a time. So it's a very traditional Hollywood style of staging, but again, you talk about subversion. It's subverted by these very athletic feats, these very humorous moments. I am not left-handed. I am not left-handed either. Like, these little ticks in there make it special beyond just the traditional sword fight.
Oh, it is beautiful. Like I said, just such like D&D vibes, like it's very video game. Honestly, borderline kind of like anime in its grandioseness. Like you miss that a lot in like more contemporary films. Like I think that's part of the reason why I do like I don't know, fantasy things, is because stuff like that is hoped for or anticipated. You don't want a lame fight where it's just like going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I need the sauce. I need you, the hero, flexing. I need the villain telling them to grovel. I need it all. I need every bit of it. I want you to stunt on each other, to give me those power levels, to know how crazy this fight is. And that is exactly what that choreography does in every fight scene that is in this film. I mean, even when we get to I think my favorite subplot of the film, which is the revenge fight, finally getting to that. What an amazing chills, Jack. When I tell you, I was almost crying. I was like, I didn't think I was going to tear up in a movie like this. Like, come on. I was like, Jack, what are you making me watch? I can't believe you.
Well, I think I love the differences too. The fight between Wesley and Inigo at the beginning being a battle of fairness and mutual respect between sword fighters, masters of their craft, versus the way that Inigo versus Count Rugen at the end, played by Christopher Guest. The way that's staged is Rugen is this guy all film who is put on the airs of being like very prim and proper, despite being a very cold and calculating creep. Like, this guy gets off in a very matter-of-fact way on torture, for example. And so he, he throws this knife at Inigo to give himself this cheap advantage. When it's a fair fight, he, like a good bad guy, he runs for the hills. He's trying to save his own skin, and it's only his arrogance that brings Inigo back into the fight. Trying to land the finishing blow, and suddenly Inigo remembers the moral rectitude and righteousness of his revenge, and is able, despite getting the couple of wounds in the shoulder, by the way, also from that fight in Scaramouche, literally is able to, get the power to avenge his father finally, and remember why he's fighting, to actually get that revenge. It's a beautiful way of giving you a second sword fight within the film, but flipping the dynamic on its head so you're not watching the same sword fight.
It's beautiful. It is action film worthy in my head. Like, someone who is interested in those things, like I implore you, like, give this film a chance. It is far more comedic and fun than what I thought it was going to be. Like when you see the cover, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be serious. Like, I don't know. I've seen Ella Enchanted. I know, what is this, a musical? Like my mind, when I got to seeing some of the swordplay, the choreography, I mean, even the main character's fight with, oh my goodness, with Andre, his character,
Isaac, yeah.
thank you, is still just really good storytelling as well. And I think you kind of like were pointing to that. There is storytelling in all of these scenes and it's done phenomenally. Like I kind of just want to go back and watch it again. I'm not going to lie.
Well, it has that timeless quality to it where there are just so many things that draw you into watching this film over and over again. Like, whether it is the set pieces and how much fun they are to watch, or whether, as I know one thing that you personally gravitated toward as well, a lot of the writing is just unbelievably on point. Like, Goldman is in top form, making one of like the most eminently quotable films of all time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, literally the quotes. I did not think I was gonna like this. I'll never love again. I can't. Inconceivable. Not a lot of money in revenge. Like I can't. What is this? No one of consequence. Life is pain. Anyone who says something differently is selling something. Like what? Like just so good.
Even simple stuff like, you have 6 fingers. Someone was looking for you.
Oh my God, yes, like the callback jokes. Like it forces you to pay attention. You can tell that it was targeted towards a younger demographic, but not without the intention to kind of almost educate in a sense. And I feel like we talked about this a little bit with the Inconceivable line and like some of the way the story is being told. Like it is a family film, and I feel like some of the quoted moments that I have with this where it just leads to great conversation. And I don't know if or how much in the timeline, I guess Jack, maybe you have better insight in this, of how much films it references versus how much it is the reference for other films. Like what's the ratio there?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's so... I mean, I haven't read the novel, so I can't speak to how true it is to its source material. I would say, just based on looking at the stylistic choices, it really does couch itself within that 1950s costume drama style. Doing so at a much smaller scale, mind you, but it really does benefit from the staging that Hollywood used at the time to build itself. But in terms of its writing, in terms of its plot, and the things that it's used as a reference for, I can think of several things that have derived off of this. And one that I pointed out during our viewing that you kind of were like, I can't unsee that now with, is this film had a very strong influence, I think, on Shrek.
Very strong. Jack, bro. 110%. I hate him. Like y'all, I got very heated. Sorry. So let me reel it in.
Let me explain what happened. Is that I literally we're seeing Prince Humperdinck as he's helping track down Buttercup. This is right at the beginning of the film after she's been kidnapped. But as he's doing all these things, like making these little points of being a really proud and prominent tracker, and I literally just say to BK, Lord Farquaad, and she just goes off.
Dude, I did not, at first I didn't see it. I guess because I'm like a bouncing baby girl to the film. So I'm like, all right, cool. I didn't see it. I also, granted, I see that this is the joke, and Shrek is 100% like a parody of this film and of Beauty and the Beast, like an inverse Beauty and the Beast parody and Princess Bride. It is a mashup of those two films. Don't at me, because when you watch this with that, the moment I saw the shot of him, the prince, he's a king, is he not?
He's not the king yet. He is still the prince.
Yeah, not yet. Okay, so he is the prince. He's like, he gets off his horse, and this low angle shot they have of him, and Jack goes, Lord Farquaad, and I go, what? No. And every scene after that, I could not unsee it, and the outfits he wore got more and more like it, and his attitude, like, you learned more about the character as it goes on. You don't not like him at the beginning. You don't know much about him, and as you learn more about him, you realize he really is this big villain, to the point where the Shrek references got overwhelming where he needs to go clear out the thieves area or whatever, the thieves cove. And I'm like, this is where he's kicking out all the fairy tale creatures.
Yup.
And then he's putting them all in the swamp. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's the cage where Donkey's in. And he's like, oh my God. And the fairies and Pinocchio. And I'm losing it. And then I sat there, Jack, like as we got to that part, and this is like halfway through the movie, like we're in the final act. And I'm like, dude, the wedding starts happening and I'm just waiting for the princesses to show up. I'm like, where are my other, holy crap, storybook characters? And I was like, The Princess Bride is like like the typical storybook, like fairy tale. It really is. There's a narrator. And my mind was like, how did I not pick up on this an hour earlier? Like, I could not believe it took the whole film for me to be like, holy crap, Indigo is Puss in Boots. Like, what is actually going on right now? And now, as a kid who grew up on Shrek, I think I really love that Shrek a lot more, like infinitely more, now that I see where all these references come from. Like, it is awesome. So I highly recommend, if you like to even just hang out and watch Shrek, or you saw it as a kid, you've got to see this. Like, you have to see this, because this is going to make Shrek infinitely funnier to you. Like, I am going to go watch Shrek like this weekend. I swear to you not. Like,
and full credit to Chris Sarandon's performance in this as Prince Humperdinck is he is so good at playing this very arrogant, self-assured, smarmy, for lack of a better word, doofus. Like, he's clearly in control, but at the same time, there is just this air of incompetence about him. And there's this air of how petty and ridiculous his opposition to true love really is. And I think the fact that he carries it off with the air that he does is part of what makes this such a memorable role.
I had to breathe because I thought of everything. Like, you said that, and I saw flashes of all the moments and everything about these characters. They're just done so well. Like, I guess I only give praise to it. The only thing that might be corny is if you don't get the references or the styles that we've kind of mentioned of old films, and the kind of story that The Princess Bride is trying to tell. You're gonna be like, all right, whatever, this is kind of lame. And then I'm gonna tell you you're whack and you need to try again, because I am kind of swearing by this movie now. Like, the more we talk about it and geek out about it and get all nerdy about it, I like it more and more.
Well, BK, if I can be honest, I've been thinking about this throughout the podcast, listening to you review the film, is really your experience of watching this is you were Fred Savage being read this book.
Yes, that was me. I was a little kid. I was sitting there. I was like, yes, Poppy, read me the story of your forefathers. And then at the end, I said, oh, he has the mustache. I should have known. Oh my God.
I will say is that I love that framing device there, and Peter Falk at the very end of the film saying "as you wish," that always gets me. Just that moment of, like, it's this cool little translation. I mean, first off, a cool little tidbit about the shoot is that Fred Savage and Peter Falk actually really adored each other as people, and it was a really wonderful actor and actor relationship, especially because Falk treated him with a lot of respect and kindness as a kid actor who was just starting out. But that moment in the film, that "as you wish" from his grandfather, is a recognition that love comes in many forms, and that, you know, yes, you're reading the story about romantic love, but what true love is at the end of the day is the bonds that you feel with other people. And it's like the grandfather imparting in his grandson, I love you, you know, no matter what, I'm always going to love you. And it's a very sweet moment for me, honestly, because I have a similar kind of childhood association with a different piece of media, but that kind of experience. So, just if I can get on a personal tangent for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please. I'd love to hear.
So when I was a little kid, and I would get really, really sick. Like that type of sick you get where you are up in the early hours of the morning as like a 3, 4, 5-year-old. My mom, who, you know, God bless her for taking care of me as much as she did, because this happened a fair number of times. What she would do is, you know, she would, you know, sit me up on our couch in the playroom while taking care of me, and she would put on the Mary Martin production of Peter Pan, which I believe it had originally been on like PBS or something like that and had been released on VHS. But I, you know, to death as a little kid, whenever I needed feel better, I always watched the story of Mary Martin's Peter Pan. And that was a great comfort to me as a kid. And so the framing device of Princess Bride has always been something special to me because it always makes me think about my mom. And so I can't go wrong with a film that's going to give me that.
Oh, that's so sweet. That really is so sweet. And I love hearing that. I'm like crying a little bit because like
I'm sorry.
No, but it's so sweet because I have those movies. We've already covered one of them. We all know about Aliens Super Close to Home. Another one is Close Encounters. Me and my mom share a lot of things with that. So it's really great to hear a story like that with you, Jack. Like, oh, I'm not the only one who has those things. So anyone who's listening who's a film nerd as well, if you have special stories with movies with your family, or if this movie has a special place close to home, please let us know. I'd love to hear what it means to you, because this is definitely becoming one of those films I need to put on my annual watch list. It's getting a little too long now, I'm not gonna lie. It used to be maybe only a handful, and now it's like a list, so it's starting to become a problem.
This is one, BK, that you shouldn't have too much of a trouble getting your hands on, because apparently, like, this is something I did not know about this film until I did the research on it. I mean, you grew up in a Mormon household.
Yes, I did.
Apparently, this is like the favorite film of Mormonism.
Yeah. It's so fun. It's the way you say it, but you're not wrong. Like, it's so random thing. Like Mormons, I know a lot of them. Typically, I may have been one of them in a past life, maybe current life. Who knows? But they like to be very wholesome. They have a very like kind of protective, very clean lifestyle, and they try to stay away from media. Like I know a lot of friends that didn't grow up with like TV or didn't really go to the movies. So for this to be, like you said earlier, Jack, like a home movie, home theater was very big. And watching VHSs, watching DVDs growing up, it was a very strong thing in my household, which is probably why I'm such a big movie nerd. And I tell you, I know this cover. I've just never seen it. I have seen it. It is there. I've seen it. I have seen it and been like, I don't want to watch this because, again, I thought it was yet another period piece. We have a lot of those in our Mormon VHS collection. So I went, please, no, not another one. A damsel in distress. This gorgeous blonde man. I'm good. Boy, did I miss out. And I know my family's going to be so proud. I can't wait to text my Nana and see what she has to say about it, because I guarantee you she will corroborate on this fact and said it had it. So it is so funny that you brought that up, Jack, because, like, you know me so well.
I just think it's interesting the cross appeal this film has and the cross sort of audiences it has, because this is a film that is enjoyed by a lot of Mormons who, as you mentioned, they live by a more traditional value set, often more conservative. But you know,
see, you said that better than I.
But the interesting thing is that the reason this film got made was because of Norman Lear, and at the time in the 80s, there was not a more potent force or progressive politics in the United States than Norman Lear. I mean, Norman Lear is the guy that founded the People for the American Way as a direct counter to the moral majority. You know, he was the standard bearer for, so you had, you know, a guy who was about as progressive as you could get at the time, was the guy who really believed in and funded the project and allowed these creatives to grow this project, for it to become something that is extremely beloved by a lot of people in a very conservative community. I just find that fascinating that it had that kind of journey and that it has that kind of cross appeal, because I don't think it's a political film at all. I think it is just a fairy tale. It is just a wonderful story that people identify with, and maybe that's the best lasting legacy, and maybe that's why it became the cult classic it did through the home video market, because it has something to speak to for everybody, I think.
For sure. I think you are totally right on that. And it is very interesting to learn that out. I guarantee you, I don't think they knew. I don't think they knew who made this movie because, or maybe it didn't even matter, to be honest, because the movie itself really only perpetuates a story of love, of compassion, of a love so binding that it would triumph all, a love that can go against all odds, and a very kind of family atmosphere with the narration and the idea of a family legacy through generations. Genealogy is huge in Mormonism. So I think those kinds of themes and the overarching message of love conquering all is probably why it resonated with them so much, and probably why it resonates with so many. Like you said, Jack, a fairy tale, something you can get washed away in and lose yourself to and really believe in something strong like that. I think, Jack, I think we all want to believe that love conquers all. I know I do. And this movie definitely got me in my feels multiple times, and I'm not happy about it. Okay.
I mean, it is a success on so many levels. I think that it is a triumph of intelligent writing. I think it is a triumph of editing and pacing. I think that the acting in it is something that's truly special. But at the end of the day, I think that unifying force, the fact that you don't feel the weight of genre or the weight of convention upon it, the fact that it is just a story that you really want to pay attention to and really want to fall in love with yourself, I think that is the legacy of this film, along with just the cross appeal, just the fact that it speaks so clearly to people is genuinely special.
I don't think there's much more to say after that, Jack. Wow, how are you gonna do me like that? You really like sent that home. Like my heart went, it fluttered. It went, ugh. Because you're totally right. You hit the nail on the head with that. And I'm so glad you shared this with me, Jack, and shared it with our film nerds. I know that there might be people out there who haven't seen this or are big fans of this that I might have been afraid to pitch this to a friend to watch. I encourage you, I implore you, do not be soft. This is definitely a film that people will be pleasantly surprised with. Don't tell them anything, put it on and make them watch it. And I guarantee you are going to have more members of the cult of the Princess Bride, because I know I am, and I hope you're too, now that you've listened to us geek about it and know a little bit more about its backstory and its creation and how much we love it. And I know we've got tons of more films coming up. So Jack, I have to ask though, what is your best part about this? Is there anything that really just stands out to you? Is it that message at the end there that hit it hard for you, or is it really that connection with your mom that makes this so special?
It's the personal connections, and it's really it is the ability to be able to share a story like this. And actually, BK, on that subject, we're getting towards the end of the podcast here, and we're about to tell people what we got coming up next. But I want to take a brief off script for a second on sharing film to talk about a venue that is very near and dear to my heart from back when I was growing up. So if you live in the Raleigh area, you might be familiar with the Rialto Theater. Now, this is where I know my family has always frequented it, but this is where the best kind of art house and lesser known films actually got to the Raleigh area throughout the years and got shown. I mean, it's where I saw the documentary Spellbound.
Nice.
It's where I saw the Danny Boyle film Millions. It's been a place that really deeply enriched me. Now, for the last 32 years, it's been owned by the same guy, and very recently, he has decided that he is going to retire, and he is going to shut the doors on the theater for a period of time.
No.
Now, they're still looking for new ownership, and I personally am hopeful, but I know the house is closing, I think, towards the end of this month, and I just wanted to be able to just say thank you to the Rialto for being a venue that built me and enriched me as a person.
Aw.
I know that when I think about films like The Princess Bride, it makes me think about the experience of sharing film and sharing stories with people. Now, the plan is hopefully that it will reopen, focus on a more art house and a more independent vibe, and I hope so. But if you're able to get to the last showing that they do at midnight of Rocky Horror, if you're able to see any of the films they've got showing right now, like, please support that place. It is one of the true special theaters in America. The Rialto is a really genuinely special place. And it made my life as a film viewer better. And so I would be remiss if I let this week of the podcast go by, BK, especially when we're talking about a film that builds up that emotional connection that we all have with film. I had to say a little something there in tribute to a venue that has given me so much over my life.
That is so lovely. And if y'all know, and if you don't know, shout outs to your local theaters. Those are the ones that are keeping these old films going and are really run by such passionate people for the love of film. So I know there's been a lot of those in your life, and I've found a few in Austin now that I've been here. It's been really cool to see that come out. So I'm really, really happy you got a chance to shout that out. And fingers crossed that it lives, and we're sending our love and energy out there. I know that a lot of the film nerds would be sad to see a theater go. But I know that I know we've talked about them before. Alamo tries to pick that up as a good chain as well. Again, not sponsored, but I have to shout it out. It's the only other theater that I've seen play things that aren't coming out and pop in. They have great oldies that they toss up on there. So if you are looking for that, and that is near you too, and you can't find a local theater, but you've got access to that, please go check them out. Go out there, go see the films. That's how stuff gets made. Seriously, like, that matters. You feeling confident enough to leave. I know we are still in a panorama. We are in a perpendicular. That is COVID-copia, and it is scary, but there are good precautions, and it's worth it to see that content and that media get the love that it deserves.
And just who knows? Those are the type of theaters that might actually show you a film like Princess Bride.
Yes, yes. And so, without further ado, I do really, really want to tease what we've got coming up for the next episode. Jack, are you excited about this film as much as me, or is it just me? I'm sorry.
I'm really excited because it's about time that we had some Paul Verhoeven hyperviolence on the podcast, and that is exactly what we're getting next week, because we are about to watch 1990's Total Recall.
Yes, with my boy Arnold. Who legend action star sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I feel like Total Recall, and among other things, when I learned how old the first Terminator was, I kind of went on a whole thing, and I've realized that I love sci-fi, and some of the tropes we see in a lot of contemporary stuff is 100% from this film, on top of just being a really cool and fun story. So I cannot wait for y'all to check that out with us. I know we're going to be doing some watch parties with it. So if you're around, be sure to join our Discord. I will share those things on our social medias, where you can follow us on Twitter at the RFN_podcast, or on Instagram at Revenge of the Film Nerds, where we post all the things and share all the links. So if you want to catch some of our live movie viewings with live BK Jack commentary, be sure to follow us there to know when the next one is.
Absolutely. And this is not going to be one that you want to miss. I said it a little bit tongue-in-cheek before, but in terms of film history, this is a juicy one too, because it is a flashpoint in a long and storied discussion of gratuitous violence in film. And if you know anything about Paul Verhoeven, he is one of the few that uses it to absolute perfection. So I can't wait to talk about this. I can't wait to do this as a watch party. And I highly recommend getting in there to watch that one with us, because it is a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. And not to mention the practical effects. All right. right. Let me hold off, though.
Let's hold off.
Let me hold off. So thank you for hanging out with us. I know me and Jack could chat all day. I hope you enjoyed listening to its very, very end. We appreciate you who made it this far. Y'all are the ones that keep us going. If you want to hear more from us, if you got any questions, suggestions for future coverage and or watch party funds, be sure to add us on Twitter or up in the Discord if you're already in there. We've got a film nerds section for all you movie heads. We are always there lurking. I know I had an amazing time today geeking out with you, Jack. I hope you had a good time today, too.
Wonderful time as always, BK. I hope that you take care, and all of you listening out there, I hope you take care as well.
Yeah, we'll see you around. Bye-bye.